You know, really where we need to be is as a brand. Let's say a brand. People, you know, you saw that slide with the real story. You know, so here's where we really need to be. Is so you know your average person, particularly say like during an election, get up in the morning and put on TV news, people yelling at each other, some crazy thing happened overnight or some debate. Then they get in the car, they put on the radio, same thing. They go to work, and Facebook friends, or people are emailing them. When they sit down with the newspaper, what they want is sort of a calm, thoughtful experience that lets them figure it out and kind of decide what they think. That's different than newspaper. You know, really the original tradition in our country was a partisan press, right? And even the names of newspapers said something. The Atlanta Constitution's name, this isn't really a liberal conservative thing, comes from after the Civil War, the call to return Georgia to constitutional government, because it was under like federal military rule after the war. So newspapers always had a position, but now people's expectation of newspapers is to kind of give them both sides, to be fair, because everything else is so polarized, I think.
All right, makes sense.
So that's kind of, so it isn't like, if we could just keep our liberals happy online, our conservatives happy in print, man, that'd be great, that'd be a good day, but it won't work that way.
The challenge is finding that middle line for you guys as a print media.
Absolutely, especially in print. I mean, online, things are a little bit different, but people expect that from our brand. And any time they feel like we've stepped away from that, they'll let us know. Now, some people on either side are never happy. Of course, you know, there's nothing you can do, but that's really what we're trying to do now. Yeah.
How much do the journalists themselves, who are actually writing these stories, kind of influence where it falls, and how much are they directed? And
well, I mean, a couple things about that. We've actually worked really hard and done training and all kinds of things with our folks to try to eliminate bias. I mean, the fact of the matter is every human being is biased in a certain way, and so but you can learn to take it out of stories and be fair. So that's really the expectation on our staff, particularly for our news writers. The other thing I always remind people of for a journalist, to accuse a journalist of having an agenda is sort of the highest form of insult to them. Even though people do that all the time, it's they're on the radio or on TV or letter writers and all that stuff, that someone has an agenda. But the truth is, if you pay close attention and read what they do closely, or talk to them, and our people are always available to talk. In fact, they kind of have a requirement to respond to readers and all that. They work really hard at it. We have a full-time immigration reporter, Jeremy Redmond, who is one of our best. I mean, the lengths he goes, you can imagine what it's like to cover immigration in Georgia. I mean, there don't seem to be any, sort of calm, safe discussions on that topic. And he goes to great lengths, and there's a lot of debate now about terminology and all this stuff. And the work he does to make sure that his stories are representative is pretty amazing. And so that's what we try to do. And I think that is more and more a requirement of newspapers, because some of the other media, they just don't worry about it, or they're taking a position, or they're appealing to a point of view. And we've got to kind of claim that position.
All right, question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Who is the AJC's biggest competitor here in Atlanta?
Wow. It depends kind of on how you look at it.
Is that even on your radar?
What you got to remember is we live in a world where competition is like Google, Yahoo, Facebook now, you know what I mean? And so those are international brands that do certain things that we have to, we kind of have to own certain things. I tell our news, our competition is the world now. And on certain things, and you saw some of them, we have to be better than anyone else. So like Georgia legislature, which is something we really do an awful lot with. I don't want to wake up and find out anybody thinks anybody else does it better than we do, whether it's digital, online, in print.
And do you think that drives you towards the middle even more, papers that have 2 or 3 big papers circulating in their metro area?
But nobody has that. The truth is that virtually every market is a one newspaper market now. There's some places like New York, but really the New York Times Times has, I think, way more circulation, I have to check, way more circulation outside New York.
Just kind of going off of what you mentioned about the world being your competition, which obviously, you know, is the truth. What are some of the tactics, because I'm from New York, and so, you know, just comparing the AJC to, you know, the newspapers in New York City, I remember getting up in the morning and going to grab the paper so that I could read it on the train on my way home, you know, on my way to work and then back home. So everyone kind of does that in New York. So what do you think some of your tactics are going to be moving forward, since that's a big challenge for Atlanta? People aren't doing that anymore.
They can't read in their
They
cars.
can't read in their car.
Although they drive like they are. Yeah.
True.
You know, I want to get into some of the digital stuff in a little bit. I want to use this one example on the bias and the both sides. So this is a good example of how clear you have to be. So we changed our opinion pages, and we did a couple things. The most significant one thing is we sort of really send a clear message about both sides. I can tell you that before we did this, like with the columnists on the right-hand page, we ran an equal number of liberal versus conservative columns, but people didn't believe it. But when we did this, they did. You know what I mean? So it's been really important, kind of from every point of view, the content, the design, the marketing message, the way we talk about it, to make it abundantly clear that we do it every day. You know, we even run 2 cartoons. You know, Mike Lakovich, who's very, you know, is our guy. He's won the Pulitzer Prize twice. He's liberal, but our readers think he's funny, so he gets away with a little more maybe than he otherwise would. But it's we literally have to do it this way to kind of get that message to people. Oh, you know, I talked a little bit about marketing. So we have really pushed this, and not a lot of papers do this. And I don't want to say we're criticized, but we are sometimes questioned about this, about talking to readers in this way. But again, what we try to do is just remind people of what we're doing and talk to them about what we're doing. You know, we really do have way more people coming to the legislature than anybody else. You know? And what we're finding out was people would take credit for other news media would literally take credit for things we were doing, you know, because we weren't really talking about it. So that's become a really important thing for us to do. And it seems to be working, because people in our research will sometimes repeat back what we're saying. So I don't know if you have any questions about that. And I'm big on, part of the reason I'm here is that, you know, we can't be like a faceless institution that seems hard to access, you know. I mean, these are real people. The person whose name is on that story is a real person with, you know, who's on the train in the morning, or, you know, taking her kids to school, or taking a class at night, you know, just like you. And we can't ever let people think that it's like some agenda, you know, something's going on behind the scenes, you know. So it's that sort of transparency thing that's such a big deal now in society. Okay, so I talked a little bit about our research, and this is the key, kind of a key metric that we use. And I don't know if this may not be as up to date as it should be, but every time we do research, we ask people, in the past 6 months, do you think the newspaper's gotten better, worse, or stayed the same? And then we take how many people said it got better, subtract the number who said it, because most people end up in the middle. You know how that is when you do research. People go to the safety, you know. And so our goal has always been keep this positive, keep it above the blue line, right? Because if we call it momentum. If generally people think it's getting better, then you must be doing some things right. Let's keep doing them. And if ever they start to think it's getting worse. Now, I mean, this is just a coincidence, but I came in January of 2011, right about here, but a lot of things were underway. I like to take credit, but I really can't. I don't deserve the credit. The staff and a lot of people, we're doing a lot of things right, and we've been able to keep them going. So.
The dip in 2010, did that coincide when Obamacare passed?
I don't know. We've had 2 dips in July. Did you notice that? So I'm like, let's not do research in July. I don't know. We have never been able to figure that out exactly, what was going on then. You know, at first I thought, well, maybe that was the height of remember that crazy Republican primary season? sometimes you do get an anomaly in research, as you know, so you kind of look for the trend. If your trend's in the right direction, you can't explain one of the numbers. So that's where we've settled in, but I don't know. So. Okay, so about the future, to your question, we have got to make this transition to a digital world and make sure that we're where our customers want us to be. But we can never forget what we're really here for, and I'm very passionate about that. I think that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the challenge, of our age for newspapers is to figure out how we can keep doing this important work. I mean, a lot of the assumptions about this democracy were based on media, the First Amendment, and the idea that government would be held accountable and free speech would be available. And that's when you talk to journalists about why we do what we do. That's why we do this. I mean, if we were trying to make money, we'd be in an MBA class and doing that instead, right? But it's really about informing the electorate and pursuing these ideals. And then, I always like to say this. I mean, there are stories that just need to be told, and if we don't tell them, they won't get told. And I believe, very deeply, as an editor, as a person, that nothing is more basic to humans than storytelling. I mean, language was invented to tell stories. We understand our world. Our world changes. We change through story. And if you think about yourself and the way you have come to understand things, or do things, or even learn things, it's a good story that resonates with you. And I like to make this reference too. I don't know if any of you saw the movie Lincoln, but what was Lincoln's reputation? Just an incredible storyteller in every situation to make his point. And what do you remember about that movie? The stories he told. You could probably tell some of them yourself. So that's our job, is to tell Atlanta stories. So, I mean, when you get into the digital world, it's sort of a simple thing, right? People want what they want when they want it. And they're impatient, and they're doing stuff. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have an array of products as we try to figure out where the world's going. Because anyone who wants, if you have had any guest speakers come in here and tell you where media is going in the digital world, I assure you that they're wrong. Because all the smartest people I know will tell you that you just don't know where it's going to go. Okay? So we've got kind of two situations. We have our free website, which is a AJC.com, very well known, very powerful brand in the market, very well established. We're in the midst, actually, of redesigning it and improving it. But one of the things we learned in our research is that our subscribers, the people who were paying us, they wanted their own website. Because they found AJC.com, which is really not designed for newspaper readers. It's kind of designed for the here and now, what's going on, entertainment. And they wanted a more newspaper-like experience, so we have myajc.com. So we have two sites, which presents a certain challenge branding-wise and marketing-wise and otherwise. But the one is for subscribers, the other one's free. For now, we're on that path. Questions about that?
What's the price difference in the paper versus the digital subscription?
There's a few different, ways we price it. The bottom line, what we would tell you is you're a subscriber. And by subscribing, here's the price, and you can have what you want. If you want to pay for 7 days a week, great. If you don't want to pay for 7 days a week, great. But we wouldn't necessarily make it cheap with things, because what we're trying to do is a subscriber it's like being flying in first class. The ideal economic situation for us, though, just to be honest, is if you say, you know what, don't bring me the paper except on Sunday, because half of our costs are in printing and delivering the paper. So I don't know how many case studies you guys have done, but any business that could get any piece of half their costs can really do something with the bottom line. Our challenge is we still have hardcore print readers. I mean, when we do research, people will say, well, I'll answer your questions, but you're not going to go printing the paper, are you? I do. So there are still people who love to print newspapers. And we have to, not force them. We kind of got to let the market, for as long as we can, take us where it needs to go. Does that make sense? Who are those people?
Yeah, and I might have
You know them.
a little bit late, but is it an older demographic?
Sure. Newspaper readers